Hello, my name is Marianne Tidwell and I am part of Group 5 for the Author Study Project. And our author that we chose is Faith Ringgold, and the book that I have is Aunt Harriet's Underground Railroad in the Sky. In this book, we see the main character Cassie and her younger brother Bebe, and they're taking an adventure in the sky when they come across a train. This train is special as it is commemorating the many slaves and their fight for freedom. The conductor of the train is Harriet Tubman, a real-life hero who helped hundreds of slaves escape to the north for freedom. When Bebe jumps aboard the train, Cassie goes on her own adventure to save him. Through the guidance of Tubman, Cassie experiences the journey that many slaves took through the Underground Railroad. Cassie travels through the woods and hides in the houses of many conductors. At the end, Cassie is reunited with her brother, while they all celebrate freedom. So how does this book support the lesson objective? Well, for these lessons that I made, students will be studying figurative language. In the text, Ringgold uses much figurative language to describe the journey of Cassie and the slaves. Students will need to be able to use the context clues as well as the illustrations to decipher the meaning of phrases. Additionally, students will learn historical information about the Underground Railroad. Students must be able to use the text to understand the purpose and function of the Underground Railroad and how it helps slaves escape to freedom. So what will the students achieve by the end of these lessons? Well, they must be able to identify examples of figurative language and decipher their meaning from the context clues, images, and illustrations. They must also be able to understand the true meanings of the Underground Railroad. What is it? Why was it called the Underground Railroad? What did it do? And how did it help many achieve freedom? Also, they're going to connect this theme of freedom to the text and to the Underground Railroad. So these lessons will take the course over about a week, 5 days of school. During day 1, the teacher will start by saying a few examples of figurative language, such as, "She ran as fast as a cheetah," or "I'm so hungry I could eat a horse." Students will talk in partners about the meaning of the sayings and then share their answers with the group. The students may also think of other examples that the teacher will chart on the board. The teacher will explain that sometimes good writers say words and phrases that do not exactly mean what they say, which is called figurative language. The class will work together to create an anchor chart with the definition of figurative language, some examples, and their meanings. On day 2, the teacher will again review figurative language. The students may talk to their partners and give a few examples to each other. The teacher will then survey the class about any knowledge they have about the Underground Railroad. The teacher will explain slavery and what the Underground Railroad was used for. Then the teacher will ask the students why they think it was called the Underground Railroad. Students may discuss with partners and then share with the class. The teacher may also chart responses. The teacher will then explain that it is a form of figurative language. The teacher will also introduce Harriet Tubman and her role in the Underground Railroad. Students will then watch the Brain Pop Jr. video on Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad. Students will then discuss the meaning of the Underground Railroad and Tubman's life. Students will be able to draw a picture of what they know to be the Underground Railroad to be, and they will share with their peers. On day 3, the class will review figurative language and the Underground Railroad. Then the teacher will tell the students that they will be reading a story about a little girl who is learning about the Underground Railroad from Harriet Tubman herself. The teacher will first do a picture walk. Students will share what they think the story is about and what they notice about the pictures. The teacher will then read the story, Aunt Harriet's Underground Railroad in the Sky. On day 4, the class will review figurative language. Then the teacher will reread Aunt Harriet's Underground Railroad in the Sky. The teacher will stop periodically to ask comprehension questions. Prior to reading, the teacher will hand out sticky notes to each student. The teacher will ask students to listen carefully for examples of figurative language, or words and phrases that might not mean what exactly they say. After reading, the students will share their examples of figurative language from the text. Some examples include, "The steam rose from the form and formed a soft blanket that lifted me up, up, up above the falls." Also, "We are free, we have shook the lion's paw." Or, "Aunt Harriet yelled in a voice that shot through the air like joyous bolts of lightning." Any of these examples. As a class, the students will work to create a chart with the figurative language examples and what they mean. On the last day, students will revisit figurative language examples from the text. Then each student will get a quilt square. The reason they're getting a quilt square is because Faith Ringgold is very well known for all of her quilt artwork that she includes in her text, most famously the Tar Beach, and she includes that in all of her, most of her writings. So we will talk about that as well. So each student will get a quilt square, and they will pick one of the figurative language examples from the text and depict what they believe it to mean on their quilt square. After, students will share their quilt's language and why they believe it is important to the story. Students will also discuss the theme of freedom from the story and will have to relate that to their quilt square. Students will need to include how the theme of freedom relates to their language example in the story. So what do the students do to demonstrate what they learned or how they achieved the objective? Students will demonstrate that they understand figurative language through the application on the quilt. Students will need to identify the language in the story, be able to explain and defend in discussion, and then draw a picture of what they believe it means to be on the quilt square. Students will also relate the understandings of freedom and what the Underground Railroad was and why it was created. Participation in group and class discussions will also demonstrate learning. Effectiveness of the lesson. The lesson will be deemed successful if students are able to offer thoughtful questions and answers in group and classroom discussions. Also, students will show success by identifying the figurative language examples from the text and illustrating their meanings in the picture. Finally, students will be more knowledgeable about the Underground Railroad through the video, discussion, as well as the text, and must be able to relate the theme of freedom to their pictured quilts in the discussion and the explanation. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed.